Chairman, we're live.
Thank you very much. Welcome everybody to the Local Government Pension Scheme Pension Board on this Friday, the 3rd of December at 10 o'clock. Before we get started, I'd just like to read a short announcement. Attendance at this meeting. This Council will be holding this meeting electronically. Members of the public may also attend this meeting in an electronic capacity, and there is a link in the Council's website for them to do so. Members of the board are asked to keep their microphones switched off until called to speak and to switch their microphones off once they have finished speaking. Cameras may be left on throughout the meeting if members wish. If you experience connection or other technical issues, it may help to switch your camera off. Cameras should be switched on if and when you are speaking in the meeting. To indicate a wish to speak, members should use the raise hand function. Use the meeting chat function exclusively for voting. At the end of the debate on each item of business, there will be a vote. Members should use the meeting chat function by indicating for, against, or abstain. I will declare the result after each vote. Breaks of at least 15 minutes will be held every 2 hours, and they will be taken after a speaker in a debate has finished speaking. If we are voting, the vote will be conducted before the break is taken. Other breaks will be incorporated as appropriate. Thank you. So before we start, I'd like to just sort of go through the membership and for people to introduce themselves. So if I announce the name, if the person could come onto the camera and just introduce themselves very briefly and perhaps which side they're on, employer or employee, that would be very useful. Thank you. So the first is Jolyon Adam.
Hi there, thanks Adam. This is my first board. I'm on the employer representative for Schools and Academies pool. I won't say too much more than that, but happy to be here.
Thank you and welcome. The next is Sarah Ansell.
Good morning, I'm Sarah Ansell. I'm an employer representative and I work at the University of Hertfordshire.
Thank you. Rob McCarthy.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Rob McCarthy. I'm an employer's substitute representative. I'm Chairman of the Hertfordshire Association of Parish and Town Councils. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gail Johnson.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Gail Johnson. I'm a retired accountant and I'm a member representative on the board.
Thank you very much. Kevin O'Daly.
Hi, I'm Kevin. I'm a member employee representative on the board. Thank you.
Thank you. David Gooden.
Hello, Chairman. Name's David Gooden. I'm a substitute member representative, Herts County Council.
Thank you, David. And Tim Perkins.
Thank you, Chairman. Tim Perkins, sub-member representative, was employed by Abbots Langley Parish Council, now just transitioned to being a retired member representative.
Thank you very much, Tim. And just to check that there's nobody that I've forgotten, if there is, they should introduce themselves now, and I apologise if I've done that. No, I think that's okay. Okay, so we move into the first part of the business, which is to mention membership changes. I think Jolyon had already mentioned he's been appointed to the board for 2 years as an employer representative for schools and academies. And there are some apologies, and those are from Mike Collier, James Kidd and Monica Patel. Okay. So at this stage, I'll just ask everybody if they could declare if they have any financial or pecuniary interests related to specific items on the agenda. No? Okay, thank you. So the first item is to confirm the minutes of the last meeting are accurate, and if there are any comments, make those now, please. Otherwise, we'll go to a vote, and we'll go to a vote to make sure that those are a true and accurate record. Could you please type in the chat if the minutes are acceptable? Thank you. Okay, I think those minutes have been accepted, so we'll move on to the next item. Thank you. So item 2 is the annual report and statement of accounts 2020-2021, and that's going to be presented by Philip Prasad.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, all. As you'll be glad to hear, I can confirm that the annual report and statement of accounts has been fully signed off by EY on the 8th of October, slightly later than the 30th of September deadline. Although we missed the deadline in England, only 9% of councils, including 3 county councils, were signed off by the deadline, showing the large issues with audit for the 2021 accounts. At the prior board meeting, members heard directly from EY regarding the adjusted and unadjusted figures. I can confirm that these figures didn't change in the final version of the annual report and statement of accounts and can be seen in 3.1 of the report. Officers presented a training session on the statement of accounts on the 23rd of November, and the slides for this session have been sent out to all members. That's all I was going to say on this report. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. And if members could indicate if they have any questions. And the first question, please, is from Gail Johnson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Philip. I apologise that I didn't pick this up at the time of the training session. I just wanted to understand why what appeared to be a material adjustment of 10 million on the pool property did not get adjusted. Is it because of the base figure that was being adjusted was very much larger?
The main different issue with that one was EY calculated the pool property to be a positive £10 million adjustment. Through our discussions with the property managers themselves, we actually discussed and formulated that it was actually a loss because EY had a positive gain and we had a loss and we couldn't make a final decision. We put it through as an unadjusted figure.
So the unadjusted figure was your figure or EY's figure?
So the unadjusted, that £10 million increase is EY's figure.
Right, right. And so how did you, were you having 2 different ways of approaching the calculation?
So ourselves, we've used the manager's calculations for the 31st of March and EY use indices across the whole property portfolio.
Right.
So indices, of course, is every property fund across the whole of the UK. Our managers have turned around and said, actually, we think it was an £8 million loss, mainly on CBRE. So because we could make that difference up and EY have calculated that, they were happy to keep it as an unadjusted figure.
Right, yes. And in the context of the pool property, I take it wasn't so material that you had to go to barricades over it, as it were.
No, the pool property is over £500 million, so £10 million is very minute in the scale.
Yes, okay, well, that's interesting. Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Okay, if not, then we're going to move to the vote on the recommendation, and the recommendation is that the annual report and statement of accounts 2020-2021 report is noted, and if you could just put that in the chat, please. And we thank Philip for the report. Okay, I think that's noted. So we will move to the next item, which is the Employer Risk and Governance Report, and that's going to be presented by Anne Namaburu, and thank you very much, Anne.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning all. This is the Employer Risk and Performance and Governance Report. the quarter July to September. In section 4, we have analysed.
So, sorry to interrupt, Anne, but it's very, very quiet. I'm just going to try and turn. I'm just going to try and turn my volume up because I can barely hear it. Sorry. Thank you. So that's
a bit better.
A little bit.
Okay, not to worry. I'll just speak a bit more louder. Thank you.
Thank
you, Chair. In section 4, we have analysed scheme employers by risk categories. Red risk-rated employers decreased by 5 in the quarter, and this is due to the number of outstanding admission agreements signed this quarter. The number of employers being monitored under each risk category is outlined in Appendix A. Table 3 is a new table to this report, and it provides a breakdown of the 23 scheme employers in the red risk category, with further detail on the progress of each category. Table 5 highlights the number of outstanding admission agreements each quarter. This quarter, we note the number of outstanding admission agreements has halved over the past year due to the success of the admission agreements policy. The employer, which had members deferred in line with the admission agreements policy last quarter, has now returned their admission agreement signed. The member has now been reinstated of membership, and we no longer have any employers with members deferred. The performance monitor in Appendix C highlights the results of the completion of the external audit. It details the complaints and IDRPs in Appendix E, with the number of complaints decreasing in comparison with last quarter. Details of late payers and forms are outlined with a summary with a performance over the last 6 months. Fund policies have also been reviewed by officers, which will be reported in a later paper. And lastly, LPPA's performance against their SLAs remains elevated above their target of 95%. Thank you, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you very much, Anne. And I'll just ask anybody if they have any questions to indicate, please, with the raised hand. And it looks like Anne's got away with no questions this time. So thank you very much. And oh, Gail, would you like to ask a question?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I think my technology is running about 5 minutes behind everything else this morning. Sorry. Thank you very much, Anne. I'm really pleased to notice the progress on the red categories. Could I just pick out a couple of items in your new table 3? One is a notice that there's been a breach that's been reported to the pensions regulator, and I assume that's really rather a big deal. And my second question is about the employers with whom we're negotiating payments for the outstanding cessation deficits. I wanted to ask whether the cessation deficit policy that follows will be of use in these particular cases, or whether it's not backdatable.
In regards to the employers which have outstanding deficits, this new cessation policy is currently being applied retrospectively, as those employers have been offered repayment plans in order to cover those deficits. We're also trying to investigate a number of other pragmatic solutions whereby their scheme employers would be able to absorb those deficit values and kind of extinguish those debts to those charitable bodies. In regards to the employer that has breached, yes, this is a breach that we reported to the pensions regulator last year. We are continuing to endeavour for that debt. However, this employer has also had their last active member leave participation of the fund, which will result in a cessation. If that employer does not pay those amounts, it would be consumed as part of their cessation deficits, which they would also need to pay.
Although perhaps the prospect of them paying is not so great.
At the moment, no.
Patrick, would you like to come in?
Yes. Unfortunately, the chairman, Mike Collier, is not able to attend today, and we discussed this with him yesterday, and he asked the same question, Gail. We will need to contact the actual seeding employer, which is a district council, to make them aware that this particular body has not been paying its secondary contributions, and the secondary contributions go to paying the deficit, and make them aware that if we are unable to recover payments from this body, then the assets and liabilities will fall back on that seeding employer. So, and this is to make this quite clear, if there was no seeding employer, the assets and liabilities would fall across all the employers within the fund. But in this particular case, there is one. So we will go to that seeding employer and make them aware. We usually would go through a number of different steps, legal steps, to try and get some interaction with this particular employer, and the pensions regulator is another tool that we can use. We have not, since we submitted the notice to the regulator that of this particular employer, received a response from them, and that might be reflective of their particular workloads at the moment. So we're getting to the point where we've exhausted most of the steps we practically can, and now we need to inform the seeding employer that who might have some leverage over this particular contractor, that they're not engaging with the fund in paying their contributions, and they may be on the hook for them if they don't.
Right, yeah, thank you.
Thank you both. Rob McCarthy, would you like to come in now?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Before you move on, and I missed my chance, I did relay a comment via Teresa about risk number 9 on page 9 of the risk criteria, and that this comment was about town councils being mandated employers. In fact, they're not. They are designating employers. They have the right to join the scheme, but they're not obliged to join the scheme. I don't know if this comment reached you at all. And
thank you, Rob. Yes, Teresa did relay it to me. Thank you.
sorry.
Thank you, Rob. Sorry, is this a bit better?
Yeah, that's better, yes.
Thank you, Rob. Yes, Teresa did relay it back to me. Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll be taking then.
Thank you.
Good.
So we've noted that. Okay, thank you. So if there are no other comments, then I'd like to move to the recommendation, and the recommendation is the pension board is invited to comment on and note the content of this report. So if you're happy to note the report, please could you comment, put that in the chat function. Thank you. Thank you very much. That looks like that's all been noted. So we're going to move to item number 4 now, which is the Pension Fund Risk Register report, and that's going to be presented by Rob Winterton. Thanks, Rob.
Good morning. So this is the quarterly risk register report for the quarter July to September 2021. I just wanted to summarise the changes since the last quarter. So on the risk register, there are now 3 new overarching risks, which are detailed in section 4 of the report, which is agenda pack pages 41 and 42. 2 of these risks are around the LGPS Scheme Advisory Board's Good Governance report. Risk F5 is overall adherence to the key recommendations of the report, and risk E5 is the key person risk and knowledge. This is noted in the Good Governance report. However, officers felt that it should be a risk on its own merit because the risk around the knowledge of the Pension Fund Committee, the Pension Board, and current officers. The other new risk, F4, which is a new custodian risk, has been added due to the transition to a new custodian, which is likely to happen in October 2022. Hertfordshire, in conjunction with 7 other access partners, collectively procured a global custodian through the LGPS national framework. In addition to these new risks, there was a movement of one of the risks which moved from a yellow to an amber risk. This is shown in section 5 of the report. This was on risk F1, which is the age discrimination risk, which is around the McLeod and Sargent rulings. Officers assumed and felt that this risk should be increased to the addition of 2 new additional sub-risks, which are F1.3 and F1.4, which are immediate detriment and injury to feelings. That was all I was going to really say on the report, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Rob. Are there any questions or comments? No? Okay, thank you very much, Rob. And in that case, we'll move to the recommendation. And the recommendation is the pension board is asked to note and comment on the contents of the attached report. So could people, if they're happy to, state that they note the report in the chat function. Thank you. I think that's been agreed and noted. So thank you very much, Rob, for that.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item number 5 now, which is Local Pensions Partnership Administration, Local Government Pension Fund Administration report, and that's going to be presented to us by John Crowhurst. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to cover 2 areas. Brief update on the performance report, and I think I'll hopefully use the time to give you an update on Project PACE, which is the move to the new pensions administration system. So the performance report in the pack today covers the period between July and September 2021, so Q2. There isn't anything specific to call out, I don't think, in the performance report, but I do want to draw your attention to a couple of things that are happening from a BAU perspective. Obviously, we've got the triennial valuation next year, so we've been working closely with your fund actuary Hymans to prepare for that. And we did submit an initial data extract to Hymans in October to understand what the quality of the data was looking like. And all of the queries that were raised via the Hymans portal were resolved by our data team. So we're in a good position going into the next year-end process in preparation for valuations. That's quite a big exercise that's been undertaken by both parties and completed. The next piece of work that we need to work with the fund on is making sure that any outstanding year-end queries that we've got from the last tax year are resolved, and we are working with officers around what we can do to work with employers to receive any information that we haven't yet received, and to make sure that if we've got access to a third-party payroll, that we are interrogating that to process things like levers. So we're on with the planning for the valuation, which is good, and as I say, that initial data cut and any queries highlighted from that have been resolved. So I think we're in a good place from that perspective. The discussion that we had at the previous meeting around payments made within 30 days of someone retiring continues to be a key area of focus for us. We're starting to look at what opportunities the new pensions administration system may bring to us to enable us to pay more people within 30 days. So I'm hoping that actually for the next pension board meeting, I'll be able to give you an overview as to what we think the improvement may look like, subject to a few levers that we will be able to pull in the new system. We have configured the retirement process slightly differently in the new system to the way that we work now. And we had a discussion last time around being proactive in chasing outstanding queries, and not just sending the same email to the same person at the employer over and over again, but to pick up the phone, etc. So we've been able to configure the workflow slightly differently so that we can pick up things earlier in the process. So we've introduced a triage step. So the way that we work at the moment, if we receive retirement forms for somebody on Monday, the retirements team probably don't pick them up until the Thursday, Friday. And if there's something missing, we've lost 3 or 4 working days in the process. Whereas in the new pensions administration system, there'll be a triage. So as post is received, we'll be checking it before we trigger the workflow. So we're hoping to pick up anything that might be missing within 24 hours of receipt of that information, which is a fundamental shift from the way that we're working now. So that's an update on the performance. I've got quite a lot to cover on Project Pace, so I'll dive straight into that if it's okay, Chairman. So Project Pace, as you know, is the move to our new pensions administration system. The Hertfordshire Pension Funds go live is on the 24th of March 2022. There's lots of activity taking place during December. So we are in the process of completing our end-to-end testing. So what that means is we'll be running all of the processes that we undertake on behalf of the pension fund end-to-end, making sure all of the calculations work, making sure that the interaction with both the member and employer portals are working fine. Our IT team are doing penetration testing on both the member and employer portals to make sure that they're secure before we go live. We're going to conduct a performance test of the system in terms of how stable it is. So we're going to get lots of our administration staff to log in at the same time, perform activity, including bulk processes, to make sure that the system is stable and doesn't slow down or fall over. We've just completed the 4th data cut. So you may recall I mentioned that we've got 4 data cuts before the go live data cut. So we've just taken that to make sure that the integrity of the data has been transferred across as expected and everything reconciles. And the reports that we produce on behalf of the pension fund and the reports that we need to submit to your fund actuary for events, we're making sure that they're working and they reconcile with the existing reports from the system that we're using now. So there's lots of activity taking place from a system perspective. On the business readiness side, we've got lots of training and comms happening with our own staff to get them ready for go live. Our phase 1 clients go live between January and March. So we have got clients that go live in the middle of January next year. So we need to be ready for that. Next week, we will be sharing with officers at Hertfordshire the plan for comms and training with your employers. Civica will be supporting us with that activity, so they will be helping us with the training that we deliver to your employers, because the reality is they're more familiar with the system than we are, so they will be supporting that process. The plan will clearly outline what we will be doing and when, what our escalation points to you will be. So, for example, if employers are not engaging with us, or they're not registered for any of the training sessions that we've put in place, then we will be flagging that with officers and obviously asking the fund to support us with getting employers registered for those sessions. We'll also be outlining what collateral we're going to be providing. So, what short explainer videos will be available to employers, which training sessions will we be recording, what training guides will be available, and how they can access our engagement officers. Because obviously, I think we've spoken previously, it's not necessarily a one size fits all. I think employers from different sectors rely on different levels of support from us, so we're trying to tailor that accordingly. We are finalising what we call our Hypercare Plan. What that is on go live, if there are defect, so the system isn't doing what we expect it to do, then we're defining what the process looks like to resolve those issues. So, for example, if there's spelling mistakes on one of the portals, then that would be prioritised as a low category issue to resolve, but would be resolved within a reasonable time frame. And a critical error would be things like users can't access the system. So we're defining exactly what that looks like, what LPPA technical support will be, and what support Civica will be giving us at that go live. We've shared recently, I think it was the beginning of this week or the end of last week, we shared an overview of what our contingency planning looks like with the fund. So in the event that it does become a bit bumpy on go live, we've outlined how we will prioritise work, how we will make sure that we're meeting all of our statutory obligations on your behalf, i.e. disclosure rules. So we've outlined a plan around what that looks like, and we're asking the fund to endorse that approach. Not that we're anticipating huge service issues on go live, but learning some lessons from a transformation that we did back in 2018, we were very reactive and not proactive in our planning and approach. So we're trying to outline that well before we go live. And the last thing I'll mention, Chairman, and then I'll pause for questions, is we will have a go, no-go decision-making process. So there's a number of areas within the project that will need to be signed off and passed quality checks before we go live. We will share some of the detail around that with the fund. So it'll be things like, how's the data migration gone? Does the payroll reconcile? Does all the service reconcile? The pay information reconcile? Did the system pass the penetration testing? Have we got enough people trained on the system? Do all the calculations work, etc.? So there's a whole host of things that we're going to be going through a check-in and sign-off process before, obviously, we go live on the 24th of March. Thank you, Chairman. I'll pause there and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask a couple of questions, if that's okay. So yeah. My first question is about resourcing. So we've got a business as usual sort of situation. We've got regulatory change on top of that. We've got the valuation on the horizon, and then we've got this data cut. And my question is, you mentioned training, but are we absolutely confident, and can you make this board sort of assured that there is enough resource in place to manage not just the project itself, but everything else that is expected to happen at the same time? That's my first question, and I'll just ask my second question. If there are any teething issues when we go live, what processes will be prioritised? And I'm sort of thinking about death payments, I'm thinking about pension payments, that sort of thing. So if you could just outline that for us, just to give us a bit more information on that, that would be really useful. Thank you. Yes, no problem. Thank you, Chairman. So in terms of the resourcing, anything that we would deem, and forgive my terminology, as nice to have, things that are not contractual, not statutory at the moment, we've down tools on all of that activity within each of the teams. So their priority is BAU, contractual obligations, and project pace. So we've made sure that any of the nice to have stuff is not being worked on at the moment. We have recruited a number of additional roles. I think it's in excess of 10 FTE that we've brought into the business and trained on the key processes to make sure that we have got resilience. The go live will be complex for us because, as I mentioned before, we're going to have a group of administration staff working across clients on the UPM system, and another group of people within the operational team still working on Altair, because the second group of clients don't go live until September, October next year. So a few months back, we did recruit an experienced resource planner that's helped us plan how many people we need in each team at go live for when each client drops, and obviously we've made sure that we've got contingency in there in the event that the processes take longer. In the background, there's lots of stuff going on, so we are timing the processes now and timing the processes in UPM to determine whether or not some are going to be quicker, some are going to be longer, and we've factored all of that into our resource planning. So I'm fairly confident that we've got the appropriate level of staff within the operational teams to process the work. The more challenging part, I think, if I'm honest, is around the training and engagement and support that we provide to employers. We've got a core team, but if we see really low levels of engagement and we need to
to provide additional support, we're going to have to think quite carefully around how we do that. And obviously we've got opportunities to record training sessions, put explainer videos out there and that sort of stuff. But sometimes people just need direct access to a person. So I think if lots of employers needed that level of support, we may not have enough people ready today, but it doesn't mean we can't plan for March. So that was that part. In terms of the contingency plan and the prioritisation of work, so the document that I have shared with officers only recently, which is why it's probably not in the pack for the board, it outlines exactly that. So what it says is that we will prioritise obviously paying pensioners, making sure that any bereavement cases where there's a beneficiary, they're prioritised, new retirees are set up and paid, and that any ill health cases, whether that be an estimate or an actual retiree, are all prioritised. So we're making sure that there's resilience in those teams, and the teams that work across member estimates, deferred benefits, refunds. We are upskilling some of those staff so that we can move them around on go live. So we're hopefully putting everything in place that we can to make sure those priority cases are handled. And the last thing I'll mention is disclosure is another requirement that we need to make sure we comply with, and we are able to configure and measure disclosure rules in UPM, so that will be available on go live. So we'll be able to give the fund visibility around the fact that we're meeting the disclosure requirements.
Thank you very much for those answers. Can I bring Gail in now, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, John. I wanted to just home in on the March date, because I noticed it's actually slipped by a month since the last time this board met. It was February then, and it's gone to March. And from what you're saying, that will include the payment of pensions, and go live isn't until the 24th of March. I just wondered if, the pension committee, the officers are happy with that, because you're doing that in the last month of the tax year. That seems to me a bit of a high risk strategy.
Yeah, so originally we did spread the phase one clients between the beginning of January and it was the beginning of March. Gail, you're right. So we have repositioned some of those go live dates, really to de-risk the go live. So what we're doing is we're giving ourselves, because you're the biggest client ultimately to go live in phase one. We want to give ourselves extra time to run additional parallel runs to make sure that the data is transferred across as expected. And to be honest, it gives us more time to resolve any queries in our existing system that we're familiar with before the valuation next year and before we move over to UPM. So just to reassure you, even though your go live is towards the end of March, we will be running the payroll in parallel each month between now and then. So we will still be in a position to pay pensioners in each month, irrespective of the fact that you're going live quite late in March. We're pretty confident that we've got contingency in place to not run into any issues there.
Thank you. I should probably declare my interest then as a pensioner receiving payment. Thank you.
Of course. Yeah, and that go no go decision checklist that I mentioned, Gail, that obviously includes a whole area around making sure the payroll reconciles and that the payroll runs. So we'll be giving the fund visibility of the checks that we've performed and what's passed and what's not. And the last thing I'll mention is there will be a tolerance for each section. So, for example, with the data migration, there may still be errors that are not material that we plan to fix post go live. So we'll be giving visibility to Patrick and Taryn and the team before we go live, so that we're clear on what those errors are and what our timeline is to resolve those issues post go live. Because I think to say that everything's going to be 100% accurate on day one is unrealistic, but we'll give a complete overview and transparency around what that looks like.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I bring Jolien in now, please, for a question or a comment?
Thanks, Chair. Actually, it's one question, then just one comment. The question's probably a quick one. It was just about the Gmp reconciliation. It says phase 3 is completed, and in light of your comments about wanting to kind of clear the decks and get things ready for project pace, is that now done, or is there a phase 4, 5, and 6?
No, that is done, Jolene.
Okay.
Yeah, all of the information that we received from HMRC as part of that final data cut has been reconciled and member records updated.
Okay, thanks. And then the only comment was around where you were mentioning about employer engagement with the new project. The only thing I'd probably mention is from an employer perspective, employers are getting a lot of kind of information and data requests about a range of things at the minute. So McLeod, validate historic data, as you said, evaluations coming up, project pace is another one. So just a recommendation, I suppose, to make some of that communications explicitly clear when there's something that needs to be done, or whether this is just for information, because I think there's quite a lot of stuff coming down the line to employers, and having sat on various webinars with academies or other groups, sometimes it's just a little bit of seeing the wood for the trees about what actually do I need to do right now and by when.
Yeah, no, understood, Jolene. Yeah, that's a very good point. I think obviously when we share our plan with officers next week, we can go through that together, because what we don't know is what the fund's planning to communicate with employers, so we can make sure that it's not not overloaded in areas. And as you say, the priorities are clear to employers at this stage.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And if there's no further questions, I'd like to move to the recommendation. And the recommendation is that
sorry, Adam. Could I
sorry.
sorry, apologies, a late hand just gone up. I just want to give the board a sense of conversation that took place with committee last week. Committee received a similar presentation, and there was quite an in-depth discussion about the data, the integrity, resources, as John has outlined, and communication plan as well. One of the other things that John hasn't touched on was all the members. I think there's about 30,000 odd members at the moment who have access to the online portal. That portal is going to be taken down, and so all those members will have to be given new logons and passwords for a new portal. So there is going to be there's going to have to be a lot of communications to both employers and members with respect to the interactions with the new portals, that for employers, the submission of data, and for members getting access to information about their actual benefits. The new online membership portal will also give real-time data. At the moment, it just shows their most recent position when their annual benefit statement was issued. This will reflect each month's data that goes into the system submitted by employers, so it'll be real-time data. John's quite clear that there's been a lot of conversations about this with officers. John and I have been in regular dialogue. I've been challenging him questioning him about resources, data integrity, there is obviously a lot of concerns about the movement of data, particularly around GDPR, and also valuation next year as well. Committee members focused in on that particular area of questioning last week. And John, and I've spoken to John's boss, Jo Derbyshire, is the managing director. I'm having regular dialogue with her to get reassurances around resources and that the project is on schedule. The movement in date from February to go live February to March, I think that's right. John and the team are building in some additional contingency so that if there are problems with the first phase, that they they've got sufficient time to rectify them before going into the second phase of launches, which will include the Hertfordshire Fund. With respect to valuation, I think our actuary is on the line. I was just going to invite Catherine to comment on that, because we've invited our actuary and Catherine and some of her colleagues to some of the project meetings with John and his team. Again, they've been asking questions about valuation and data, so I'll let Catherine comment on that, if you don't mind, Chairman.
Thanks, Patrick. Yeah, so committee were made aware, and Pensions Board should be aware as well, that the formal valuation date is as at the 31st of March 2022. So it's probably not ideal to have the data moving from one system to another in the 2 weeks just before that. And we've recognised the risks inherent in that and are working really closely with LPPA to help manage that. As John mentioned, they've already done testing on extracts and will be continuing testing to make sure that the data integrity is maintained. And of course, when we do receive the valuation extract, which we expect to be in the summertime, it usually takes a while to complete year-end processes, and then the extract for the purposes of valuation to be prepared. We will carry out extensive checks on that against extracts that have been previously submitted, the ones that have been submitted in October this year, but also against the previous valuation extracts from 2019 to ensure that the data is consistent as possible. So it's probably, just to repeat, it's probably not ideal timing, but we're doing everything we can to manage the risk of that and ensure that the valuation is as successful as it can be, because it does rely, the first thing the valuation relies on is the membership data. We are wholly supportive of the change of system for the avoidance of doubt, and we think that the move to the new administration system is a positive thing. Our only concern is probably around timing, but we're doing everything we can on that.
Thank you very much for that. And if there are any other questions or comments, please raise your hand. It doesn't look like there are. So thank you very much for everyone who spoke on that item. And we'll move to the recommendation. And that is that the board notes the contents of the report. And if you do so, can you put that in the chat? Thank you. Thank you. I think that's been agreed now. So thank you very much for that. And we'll move on to the next item. And the next item is the fund policies review, and that's going to be presented by Anne. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you, Chair. Fund officers have begun a review of all fund policies in line with the annual review process that we are aiming to implement and ahead of the fund valuation. A gap analysis has been performed by the fund actuary in line with LGPS best practice. The cessation policy has been reviewed as a result of amendments to the LGPS regulations regarding exit credits and employer flexibilities. The changes clarify employers' position if they cease with a surplus, which may be payable at the fund's discretion, and also enable employers to enter into arrangements at the discretion of the fund to spread any cessation deficit. This policy is detailed in Appendix A for your review. The charging policy has also been reviewed to provide further clarity on the charges employers will incur of their duration in the fund, such as actuarial costs and legal costs. This policy is also detailed in Appendix B for your approval. The administering authority discretions are being reviewed by fund policies, with ongoing work being performed with the LPPA's technical team. This will be brought to the board for review in March 2022. The implementation of Project PACE next year and regulatory changes in respect of the single code of practice will result in a further review of the administration strategy. And as a result, this has been pushed forward to the July 2022 meeting. Lastly, the fund are also working with an external third party to review our communication strategy, and extensive work is being done to the pension fund website to ensure that it's fit for purpose. This policy will also be presented at July 2022 meeting. Thank you, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you very much. If there's any questions, please raise your hand. I can't see any questions, so we'll move to the recommendation. It's a bit longer, this one, so if you just bear with me. It's that the pension board notes the amendments to the cessation policy and charging policy, and notes that the policies which will be presented at a later date. So if you agree to that, please could you state in the comments. Thank you very much. That's been agreed. So we'll move to the next item now, and that's an access update, and that's going to be presented by Patrick. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is your quarterly update that I bring to this board and also goes to committee. This will provide an update of all the activities undertaken by the access pool since the last meeting at this board back in September. The background gives you the context as to why the pool has been established and why we rent an operator. The total 2.4 sets out the total assets in pool sub-funds with the operator link, and that's just over 1.3 billion. We have the Hertfordshire Fund has just over 3 billion in assets under access pool governance, which represents about 50% of assets of the Hertfordshire Fund. Further details are set out in section 8, which is in this report. The overall assets under management in the access pool are just over 32.6 billion. That represents about 59% of all the assets of the 11 funds in the pool. Hertfordshire has about 9% of those pool assets. 2.1, and there's additional detail further down in the report in section 9, talks about the work that access officers and one of my members of staff are working on this with 10 other officers from representing the other funds, drafting common guidelines for responsible investment for the access pool, and they're working with a third party called Minerva. A presentation went to the pensions committee last week, which provided a draft of those RI guidelines. Just to make it clear to the board that the guidelines that are adopted for the access pool will not supersede the sovereignty of the guidelines that the Hertfordshire Fund has. So to set that in context, if Hertfordshire had for example, screened out a particular type of investment, tobacco, for instance, and access guidelines said, yes, we allow tobacco investment, then we would not invest in their pool until they provided a solution for us that would exclude tobacco investment. So that's what I mean by the Hertfordshire guidelines. Sovereignty would supersede the access pool guidelines. You will see in section 5.4, we have now started work with a third-party provider called MJ Hudson, who were recently appointed following a procurement process to establish the liquid funds, the structures. At the moment, we have about 24 funds that have been set up to deliver equity and bond solutions for the 11 funds. This liquid structure work that we're about to do will, these are the real big deliverables. They're the ones where we feel that we will get the main management savings, and they will be structures for private equity investment, property investment and infrastructure. We expect, so in the business plan for next year, to have one of these solutions up and running within 12 months. And I think that will probably be for private equity. 5.6 in the report sets out the savings to date. And just to comment on something that was referred to earlier, access officers from the 11 funds have done a collaborative procurement recently to appoint a common custodian, and that will deliver an additional £100,000 per year savings for the Hertfordshire Fund in custody fees, which is quite significant saving and will go in on top of those management fees that we have accrued to date. So Section 6 sets out the budget position. The budget position has increased, sorry, the cost per head increased from last year to about 113,000. However, there's an underspend this year, which is reflective of not commissioning so much third-party support in assisting officers in the development of certain pieces of work. So that's all I was going to say. Section 8 sets out where the Hertfordshire's pooled assets are, what's in the fund, what will go in and what's sitting outside it. So happy to take questions.
Thank you, Patrick. I was just going to make a comment really, which was that the table in 5.6, table 2, where it says that the total savings is 1.2 million, that seems to have plateaued a little bit recently. And it was good to hear that you mentioned that we're looking to find another £100,000 savings a year. That's really good news. So I'll be sort of watching that with interest going forward. Okay, Gail, would you like to ask a question?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I wanted to come back on the development of the ESG guidelines by Minerva and to ask really whether there's early indication of whether they align reasonably closely with Hertfordshire's policy or whether they're extremely broad brush. It's difficult to envisage something that can, encompass all the members of the pool.
Yeah, so a good question, Gail. Minerva have questioned all the 11 funds. They done a series of sort of interviews, looked at policies for all those 11 funds, and the views are that there's commonalities across all of those RI. There is no policy at the moment to disinvest from any particular sectors, and the most prominent one that's in discussion is fossil fuel. All the 11 funds, that the 10 other funds that I work with, their views are that engagement is what we should be doing with these companies as opposed to disinvestment. And the rationale behind that is that you can influence change by being a shareholder. And if you've got and if you look at the LGPS as an industry, there's 87 funds. Collectively, if we work together, we can influence through board meetings and votes and influence those sort of changes. And also by disinvestment, we feel that you can't influence, you can't look at and direct those companies. And these companies are not naive. They've got quite significant sums of money going into research and development, looking at renewable energy sources. But in answer to your question, there's commonalities across, so there hasn't been any outliers. Some funds are a bit more developed in their local RI policies than others. This fund is doing a lot of work, has done a lot of work to date, and will be doing a lot of work over the next 12 to 18 months in looking at RI again. We've got a new committee of members who may have different views and beliefs. We would also want to get the views and beliefs of the board members as well, because you represent employers and members. And so there's quite a significant bit of work to do there. And also there is some financial reporting changes where we are going to have to make disclosures in our accounts with respect to climate. And it's also being captured as a risk in our risk register and will be also reflected in the valuation process as well, because of the potential impact on investment returns. With respect to the comment on savings, Adam, that you made earlier, those savings you could say have plateaued. However, if you look at previous reports, we talked about 60% of assets having been pooled. That's dropped recently to 50%, and that is because we've done some disinvestment. One particular disinvestment was because a manager that we had invested with, there'd been significant changes in the hierarchy, the investment managers who make the decisions, and the fund, the committee members were not happy with that. And we decided to move funds out of that particular manager, which meant disinvestment from the access pool. And those funds were moved into the passive manager, UBS.
So we could say that reduction in savings is linked to also a reduction in risk.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well,
sorry, I don't know if Gail wanted to come back on my comment.
No, thank you. But also, just in the context of costs, I noted that if we did diverge, or no, rather that if our policies were thought, if it was thought that our policies should prevail, and we might have to set up sub funds, then that would start nibbling away at the cost savings.
Absolutely, a very good point. If we were to specifically request access to set up a type of fund that no other investor wanted, that would come at a cost of 75,000 per fund. And yes, it would chip away at those savings.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. And if there's any more sort of questions, do raise your hand. But if not, we'll move to the recommendation, and that is that the pension board notes the contents of the report. So if we could put that in chat, if that's the case, thank you. And thank you, Patrick, for your comments. Thank you. That's been agreed. So that brings us to our next item, which is the dates of future meetings. And I'm not proposing a vote on this, but if we could just note that the dates and times of the next meetings, and if for any reason we can't be there, if we can just let the Secretariat know and send apologies in advance, that'd be really useful. Thank you. So I think that's the end of our part one business now. Sorry,
Chairman, you've got there's a hand up. Rob McCarthy.
Rob. Rob, I think you might be on mute. I think you're still on mute, Rob. I can't hear you, sorry. If you'd like to maybe put a comment in the chat or get back to us after the meeting, then we'll pick that up. Okay. I'll just check. Okay, in that case, we're going to move into the part two business. I'm not proposing a break at this time. We've only been in for an hour, so let me just move that. The public part